kept the tight-knit Spartans light years apart for more than a decade. Dr. Halsey and Captain Keyes entered the chamber. The Spartans stood at attention and saluted. Keyes returned their salute. "At ease," he said. He escorted Dr. Halsey to the center stage. He sat while she stood at the podium. "Good evening, Spartans," she said. "Please take your seats." As one, they sat down. "Assembled here tonight," she said, "are all surviving Spartans, save 3, who are otherwise engaged on fields of combat too distant to be easily recalled. In the last decade of combat, there have only been 3 KIAs and 1 Spartan too wounded to continue active duty. You are to be commended for having the best operational record of any unit in the fleet." She paused to look at them. "It is very good to see you all again." She slipped on her glasses. "Vice Admiral Stanforth has asked me to brief you on the upcoming mission. Due to its complexity and unusual nature, please disregard your normal protocol and ask any questions you have during my presentation. Now, onto the business at hand. The Covenant." Holographic projectors overhead warmed, and sleek Covenant corvettes, frigates, and destroyers appeared in a neat row on Dr. Halsey's left. On her right were a collection of Covenant species, roughly 1/3 their normal size. There was a grunt, a jackal, the floating tentacled creature John had seen on Sigma Octanus IV, as well as the heavily armored behemoths he and his team had bested. A spike of adrenaline burned through the Master Chief at the sight of the enemy. Intellectually, he knew that the images were not real, but after a decade of fighting, his instincts were to kill first and get the details later. "The Covenant are still largely unknown to us," Dr. Halsey began. "Their motivations and thought processes remain a mystery, though our best analysis points to some compelling hypotheses." She paused and added, "The following information is naturally classified. We know that the Covenant, our translation of their name for themselves, are a conglomerate of a number of different alien species. We believe that they exist in some kind of caste structure, though to date the exact nature of that structure remains unknown. Our best guess is that the Covenant conquer and absorb a species and adapts its strengths into their own. The Covenant's science is imitative rather than innovative, a byproduct of this societal absorption," Dr. Halsey continued. "This is not to say that they are lacking intelligence, however. During our first encounter, they gathered computer and network components from our destroyed ships, and they learned at an astonishing pace. By the time Admiral Cole's fleet arrived at Harvest, the Covenant initiated a communications link and attempted a primitive software infiltration of our ship's AIs. In a matter of weeks, they had learned the rudiments of our computer systems and our language. Our own attempts to decipher Covenant computer systems have only been partially successful, despite our best efforts and decades of time. Since then, they have made increasingly successful forays into our computer networks. That is why the Cole Protocol is so important and carries the punishment of treason for failure to comply. The Covenant may one day not need to capture a ship to steal the information within its navigational databanks." The Master Chief stole a glance at Captain Keyes. The captain cupped an antique pipe in one hand. The Navy officer puffed on it once and stared thoughtfully at Dr. Halsey and the examples of the Covenant vessels. He slowly shook his head. "As I stated earlier," Dr. Halsey continued, "the Covenant are a collection of genetically distinct groups in what we believe is a rigid caste system." She waved toward the grunts and jackals. "These are most likely part of their military or warrior caste, not the highest ranking caste either, given how many are sacrificed during ground operations. We also know that there is a race of field commanders, which we have historically called elites." She stepped toward the floating, tentacular aliens. "We believe these are their scientists. As she moved closer, the figure animated. The image showed the creature disassembling an electric car of human manufacture. John instantly recognized his own battlefield recording. She pointed to the giant, armored creatures. This was recorded on Sigma Octantis 4, hunters, which very well may be superior to either grunts or jackals. The massive aliens also sprang into motion, lumbering into combat, until Dr. Halsey froze the images in place. She turned and strolled back to the podium. Oni hypothesizes at least 2 additional castes, a warrior capable of commanding ground forces and possibly piloting their ships, and a leadership caste. We have deciphered a handful of Covenant transmissions that refer to... She paused, checking notes on the data screen in her glasses. Ah yes, prophets. We believe that these prophets are in fact the leadership caste, and that they are viewed by the Covenant rank and file with an almost religious reverence. Dr. Halsey removed her glasses. This is where you come in. Your mission will involve these so-called prophets, and will be executed in 4 phases. Phase 1, you will engage the Covenant and sufficiently disable but not destroy one of their ships. She turned to face Captain Keyes. I leave that in the capable hands of Captain Keyes and his newly refitted ship, the Pillar of Autumn. Captain Keyes acknowledged her compliment with a curt nod. He tapped the stem of his pipe on his lips thoughtfully. The Master Chief was unaware of any Covenant ship ever being captured. He had read the reports of Captain Keyes' action at Sigma Octantis 4 and considered the odds of actually capturing a Covenant vessel. Even for a Spartan, it would be a difficult mission. Phase 2, Dr. Halsey said. Spartans will board the disabled Covenant ship, neutralize the crew, and crack their navigation database. We will do precisely what they have been trying to do to us, find the location of their homeworld. The Master Chief raised his hand. Yes, Master Chief. Ma'am, will we be given mission specialist personnel to access the Covenant computers? In a manner of speaking, she said and looked away. I will come to that point in a moment. Let me assure you, however, that these specialists will cause you no serious complications during this phase. In fact, they will prove rather useful in combat. Shortly, you shall have a demonstration. Like Captain Keyes' statement that winning wasn't everything, Dr. Halsey's reply was another puzzle. How would such computer specialists not be a liability to the Spartans in combat? Even if they could fight, it was unlikely they'd be anything but weak links in combat. If they couldn't fight, the Spartans would be forced to babysit a vulnerable package in a hot combat zone. Phase 3, Dr. Halsey said, will consist of taking the captured Covenant ship to their homeworld. Several questions immediately formed in the Master Chief's mind. Who would pilot the alien ship? Had anyone ever deciphered the Covenant control systems? It seemed unlikely, since the UNSC had never captured one of their ships before. Were there Covenant recognition signals that had to be sent when entering their space? Or would they just steal their way in system? When a plan had so many missing pieces of data, the Spartans had been trained to stop and reconsider its effectiveness. Unanswered questions led to complications, snags, and snags led to injuries, death, and failed missions. Simple was better. He held his questions though. Dr. Halsey surely would have planned for these eventualities. Phase 4, she continued, will be to infiltrate and capture the Covenant leadership and return with them to UNSC-controlled space. The Master Chief shifted uneasily. There was no intel or reconnaissance of Covenant-held space. What did a Covenant leader, a prophet, even look like? Chief Mendez had told him to trust Dr. Halsey. The Master Chief decided to hear all the details before he asked any further questions. To do so might undermine her authority, and that's the last thing he needed the other Spartans to see. And yet, there was one thing he had to clarify. The Master Chief raised his hand again. She nodded toward him. Dr. Halsey, he said. You did say capture the Covenant leaders, not eliminate them. Correct, she replied. Our profile of Covenant society indicates that if you were to kill one of their leader caste, this war could actually escalate. Your orders are to preserve any captured Covenant leaders at all costs. You will bring them back to UNSC headquarters, where we will then use them to broker a truce, possibly even negotiate a peace treaty with the Covenant. Peace? The Master Chief considered the unfamiliar word. Was that what Captain Keyes had meant? The alternative to winning wasn't necessarily losing. If he chose not to play a game, then there could be neither winning nor losing. Dr. Halsey took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. Some of you already suspect this, but I shall state it anyway for emphasis. It is my opinion, and that of many others, that the war is not going well, despite our recent victories. What is not widely known is how badly it is going for us. ONI predicts that we have months, perhaps as much as a standard year, before the Covenant locates and destroys our remaining inner colonies, and then moves against Earth. The Master Chief had heard the rumors, and promptly dismissed them, but to hear the words from someone he trusted chilled him to the core. Your mission will prevent this, Dr. Halsey said. She stopped and frowned, lowered her head, then finally looked up at them again. This op is considered extremely high risk. There are unknown elements involved, and we simply do not have the time to gather the required intelligence. I have persuaded FleetCom not to order on this mission. Vice Admiral Stanford is asking for volunteers. The Master Chief understood. Dr. Halsey was unsure if she would be spending their lives or wasting them on this mission. He stood without hesitation, and as he did so, the rest of the Spartans stood as well. Good, she said. She paused and blinked several times. Very good. Thank you. She stepped away from the podium. We will meet with you, individually, within a few days to continue your briefing. I will show you how you will get our computer experts on board the Covenant vessel, and I will show you the one thing that will let you get from this mission in one piece. Mjolnir. Chapter 27. 0600 hours, August 29, 2552, military calendar. Epsilon Eridani System, UNSC Military Reservation, 01478b, Planet Reach. The firing range was uncharacteristically quiet. Normally the air would be filled with noise, the sharp staccato crackle of automatic weapons fire, the urgent yells of soldiers practicing combat operations, and the barked, curse-laden orders of drill instructors. John frowned as he guided the Warthog to the security checkpoint. The silence on the combat range was somehow unsettling. Even more unsettling were the extra security personnel. Today, there were 3 times the normal number of MPs patrolling the gate. John parked the Warthog and was approached by a trio of MPs. "State your business here, sir," the lead MP demanded. Without a word, John handed over his papers, orders direct from the top brass. The MP visibly stiffened. "Sir, my apologies. Dr. Halsey and the others are waiting for you at the P&R area." The guard saluted and waved the gate open. On survey maps, the combat training range was listed as UNSC Military Reservation 01478b. The soldiers who trained there had a different name, Painland. John knew the facility well. A great deal of the Spartans' early training had taken place there. The range was divided into 3 areas: a live-fire obstacle course, a target practice range, and the P&R, prep and recovery area, which more often than not doubled as an emergency first aid station. John had spent plenty of time in the aid station during his training. The Master Chief walked briskly to the prefabricated structure. Another pair of MPs, MA-5B assault rifles at the ready, double-checked his credentials before they admitted him to the building. "Ah, here at last," said an unfamiliar voice. "Let's go, son. On the double, if you please." John paused. The speaker was an older man, at least in his 60s, in the coveralls and lab coat of a ship's doctor. No rank insignia, though, John thought with a twinge of concern. For a moment, the image of his fellow Spartans, very young, and clubbing, kicking, and beating ununiformed instructors into unconsciousness flashed into his memory with crystal clear clarity. "Who are you, sir?" he asked, his voice cautious. "I'm a captain in the UNSC Navy, son," the man said with a thin-lipped smile. "And I've no time for spit and polish today. Let's go." A captain. And new orders. Good. "Yes, sir." The captain in the lab coat escorted him into the P&R's medical bay. "Undress, please," the man said. John quickly disrobed, then stacked his neatly folded uniform on a nearby gurney. The captain stepped behind him and began to swab John's neck and the back of his head with a foul-smelling liquid. The liquid felt ice-cold on his skin. A moment later, Dr. Halsey entered. "This will just take a moment, Master Chief. We're going to upgrade a few components in your standard issue neural interface. Lie back and remain still, please." The Master Chief did as she said. A technician sprayed a topical anesthetic on his neck. The skin tingled, then went cold and numb. The Master Chief felt layers of skin incised, and then a series of distinct clicking sounds that echoed through his skull. There was a brief laser pulse and another spray. He saw sparks, felt the room spin, then a sense of vertigo. His vision blurred. He blinked rapidly, and it quickly returned to normal. "Good. The procedure is complete," Dr. Halsey said. "Please, follow me." The captain handed the Master Chief a paper gown. He slipped it on and followed the doctor outside. A field command dome had been assembled on the range. Its white fabric walls rippled in the breeze. 10 MPs stood around the structure, assault rifles in hand. The Master Chief noted these weren't regular Marines. They wore the gold comet insignia of Special Forces orbital drop shock troops, hell jumpers, tough and iron-disciplined. A flash of memory, the blood of troops, just like these, soaking into the mat of a boxing ring. John felt his adrenaline spike as soon as he saw the soldiers. Dr. Halsey approached the MP at the entrance and presented her credentials. They accepted them and scanned her retina and voice print, then did the same to the Master Chief. Once they confirmed his identity, they immediately saluted, which was technically unnecessary, as the Master Chief was out of uniform. He did them the courtesy of returning their salute. The soldiers kept looking around, scanning the field, as if they were expecting something to happen. John's discomfort grew. Not much spooked an orbital drop shock trooper. Dr. Halsey led the Master Chief inside. In the center of the dome stood an empty suit of Mjolnir armor, suspended between two pillars on a raised platform. The Master Chief knew it was not his suit. His, after years of use, had dents and scratches in the alloy plates, and the once iridescent green finish had dulled to a worn olive brown. This suit was spotless, and its surface possessed a subtle metallic sheen. He noted the armor plates were slightly thicker, and the black underlays had a more convoluted weave of components. The fusion pattern was half again as large, and tiny, luminous slits glowed near the articulation points. "This is the real Mjolnir," Dr. Halsey whispered to him. "What you have been using was only a fraction of what the armor should be. This," she turned to the Master Chief, "is everything I had always dreamed it could be. Please, put the suit on." The Master Chief stripped the paper gown off and, with the help of a pair of technicians, donned the armor components. Dr. Halsey averted her eyes. Although the armor's components were bulkier and heavier than his old suit, once assembled and activated, they felt light as air. The armor was a perfect fit. The biolayer warmed and adhered to his skin, then cooled, as the temperature difference between the suit and his skin equalized.